All right, you are listening to the Animalia Hour on KGVM. We are a podcast based in Bozeman, Montana, committed to environmentalism, human health, and redefining our relationship to other animals. We hope through this podcast to inspire you to live vegan for the same reasons. I'm Kevin.
I'm Lucy.
And I'm Sarah. Hello, everybody.
Hey.
How are you guys?
Good.
Good. Having a good day.
So far.
So far, so good. Yeah. We hope that you guys are having a good day, too. I was just thinking as we were listening to the theme song, how entertaining that theme song is.
Yeah. That's good.
by local composer
yeah.
Eric Funk.
Eric Funk.
So thank you. Shout out to a wonderful person.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And I was thinking that partly because we're going to be discussing the concept of entertainment today.
Yeah.
Something that I realized I don't commonly think about entertainment and what entertainment is. I think it's so ubiquitous, like in our culture. Entertainment is so readily available, especially with streaming media.
Well, just advertising, right? I mean, advertising's turned into entertainment, you know, right?
Yeah, it's something that we just kind of accept as always going to be there for us. Right. But yeah, we wanted to make this show about entertainment. And so I thought it would just be good to discuss it as a concept first. What is entertainment? You know, and I noticed when I started thinking about it, I started having like a little bit of like a queasy feeling in my stomach, you know, kind of a bad taste in my mouth almost. And I was kind of like, what's wrong with me? Like, there's nothing wrong with entertainment. There's nothing immoral. There's nothing wrong with deriving amusement or enjoyment from something. I mean, that's part of what makes life bearable sometimes, or enjoyable.
Sure.
And I think I started to realize the more I thought about entertainment, it's because it's the nature of the relationship. I realize there's a performer or the entertainer, the one who's providing the entertainment. And then there's the consumer, the one who is consuming or judging or evaluating the entertainment. So it's this relationship between someone who's giving and someone who's taking.
Mm.
And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with a transactional relationship like that, where one person is giving and one person is taking, especially if the one who's giving has volunteered or has, consented to that. And as we know, like there are human beings who feel like they were born to be entertainers. They were born to be performers. They can't imagine doing anything else.
Well, you also hear a lot of entertainers talk about a crowd, and there's a give and take in a crowd, right? And sometimes the crowd gives back, right? And, you know, standing ovations, or just, you'll hear like someone like Conan O'Brien talk about when he's doing his opening monologue. Like some days the monologue's longer than other days because of the way the crowd is interacting with him. You know what I mean? And it's a live thing, you know, it's like it's alive, you know?
Yeah.
And when they're paid as well.
Yeah, they're... they're fine.
I don't know if that's always true, but yeah, I'm sure that's true in some cases. But I mean, for his show, there are days where the crowd is just kind of flat and he just whips through his monologue, and the other days where it just...
No, it's a good point that it's not just a one-way street.
Yeah.
There is financial compensation many times in many of these situations. And the crowd, especially with these headliners, can name any number, they give the performer their adoration. They're given fame. They're given, which ends up being a double-edged sword, though. You hear so many celebrities who have reached the level of celebrity in their performance that say I have no privacy. I have no, everywhere I go, I'm mobbed by people who think they own me or whatever. So even within the world of human performers who have given consent or even signed up for that life, there's some problems with the relationship. So I think it's the fact that relationship is prone to exploitation, and not always. Of course, we could think of people who create art and who their performance actually uplifts humanity and is life-giving and brings out the best in the audience. But unfortunately, humans are also capable of the dark side, where they are consuming types of entertainment that should give us pause, right? Throughout human history. And fortunately, a lot of those things have gone away. A lot of different things that people used to consume for entertainment no longer are a thing, or I say that, however, like the more research I did, the more I was dismayed to find out that some forms of entertainment still exist.
Yeah.
And part of you is just like, I don't know anybody who consumes that, and I would never consume that, so it must not exist. But then you find out, oh no, actually, that is still an industry. And
so you're talking about things like gladiator fights or that kind of thing.
That's a safe one to start with, I think. There was a time in human history, the Roman games, at the Colosseum, where humans had to fight to the death with other humans, or humans had to fight to the death with non-human animals, or exotic animals of all types were forced to fight to the death. And this was a form of entertainment. People consumed that for its entertainment value, which fortunately, that's not as much a phenomenon anymore. So I think, getting into the responsibility of the consumer to, first of all, consider, did this performer give consent? Okay. And then secondly, even if they did give consent in some situations, is this really something I should be supporting? Are there moral considerations here? Is there still exploitation going on? You could think about the sex entertainment industry, going from the one extreme, or like this lower extreme of like maybe pornography to stripping to prostitution to sex trafficking, even child sex trafficking. So like there's varying levels of consent to those. And some people say that, oh, there's absolutely nothing wrong. This person has given consent. But, there still should give you pause, should still be a question of, is this something I really want to be supporting? Is this something that's really good for me or for my family or for my community or for our civilization? Kind of an interesting thought exercise, I guess, into the nature of entertainment and the consumer's responsibility to really stop and think about what types of entertainment we want to consume. And then from there, I think it would be a good point to go ahead and jump into what about using animals or using non-human animals, or however you want to say that, for human entertainment. I mean, right away, one of the first things that comes up is it possible for an animal to give consent to being used to or forced to perform for human entertainment?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, that gets into the whole, what we've talked about before, like what is a happy life? What is the pursuit of happiness of a bull or a horse or a steer or a calf? Like what is happiness for them? And, if we're talking about rodeos, the cowboy, the cowgirl, the cow person, they volunteer to participate. And if they get injured, they volunteered to do that as what they call quote unquote sport. But the animals didn't volunteer, or if they did, I don't know where they volunteered. Like, I wonder if they asked them. The cowboys, do they get their consent first and just get them to press a paw print of ink on a piece of paper?
Or even are they being asked to do something that is natural behavior?
Yeah, and would they even be able to grasp the concept of what's going to happen to them?
Right.
Right. I know.
In some cases.
It's clear to me when you see these animals, they have no idea. I mean, because they're going in 50 directions at once when something bad happens to them, when they get injured and fall over. If you've watched any videos, these animals are just trying to get away from harm, and however they can do that. And it's clear that they are alarmed. And I think we saw a video of a horse being yelled at and beaten inside a stall, and the horse was just trying to get away, and it didn't care how it got away. And clearly it had no idea what was happening.
She or he.
We're
working on.
What did I say?
Yes.
We're working on.
Sorry about that.
Our language, our
She
choice.
or he.
Yeah. So yeah, of course, there's lots of different types of entertainments that use animals. So, and some of them are less, I guess, deadly or cruel. If you think about animals being used in film, on film sets, or animals used in entertainment at zoos or in aquariums, animals performing in a circus, and then you think about dog racing, and moral considerations around like things like sled racing, like the Iditarod is a world famous dog sled race that people follow for entertainment, and a lot has come out recently about that and how what that actually does to the dogs and how many of them end up dying. And then horse racing, and then kind of moving down, rodeo. As I'm moving down this list, in my mind, these things become more and more problematic, I guess, or definitely deadly, I would say. Bullfighting, dog fighting, cockfighting, and rodeo. Those are just some examples of different ways that animals are commonly used for entertainment. And I think our argument that we're going to try to convince you of today is that it's always wrong to use animals for our entertainment. That animals are not things to be just
resourced. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
And I have to be honest. You say these last four things you listed, you said used for entertainment. Really, they're exploited for entertainment. They're exploited for entertainment.
Yeah.
They're not used. Do you know what I mean?
They're used in the sense of an object, or like a commodity. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So exactly. So thank you. It comes down to how we view animals, and so I thought it might be fun to do a little thought exercise with kind of if we just imagine a continuum from left to right of, I guess we're just going to call this some kind of ontological exercise of value, and just for the sake of argument today, if we could put humans on the far right end of that continuum, humans being, we're just going to say like the most superior or the most valuable, or, just for the sake of argument today.
You sound like a speciesist. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. All the way down to the left side.
So you're talking about the way our typical cultural thinking about this.
Yeah, it just might be fun.
Just a thought experiment? Okay.
It's just a thought experiment.
Okay. I'm going to be careful here.
Yes. All the way down to the left side, where we put like inanimate objects, like a bucket of paint, a can of beans,
okay,
a tire, a rock.
All right.
Okay. So the left side is maybe the things that we think deserve the least amount of moral consideration or the least amount of compassion. The tube of cardboard that's in the middle of your toilet paper roll. Okay, is the far
So
left
specific.
side.
It's very specific.
I'm trying to think of things that you could just do whatever you want to it, and you don't have to feel any moral obligation to think about.
Okay, how about one of these porta potties?
Yeah.
Porta potty. All right.
Yeah, so that would be near the left side, right? So I guess the question would be, where do you put? Let's start with dog. Okay, let's just start with dog, because I know that many of us have had the experience of actually observing a dog's moral capacity, and we've bonded with dogs, and they do become part of our family. They become a best friend to many of us. Would you put dog closer to the left, the inanimate object end of the continuum, or would you put it closer? Is a dog closer to a can of olives, or is a dog closer to a human being in your mind?
Interesting.
So
well, it clearly, I think, it's funny how we made these demarcations, but things we might classify things that are alive versus things that are not alive, and that might be the continuum. But obviously, a living animal would be closer to a human than it would be to some inanimate object.
Because we're both animals. I mean, we're
Right.
like,
Yeah.
And especially we never draw this line, but I always find it fascinating. You know, we talk about human evolution and all these people that are, you know, maybe don't accept human evolution, and yet our culture widely wants to say that we evolved up through, you know, the primordial soup, and yet at some point, once we've achieved our height of glory, the human, like we want to all of a sudden put a demarcation in there. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, it doesn't work with the idea of evolution to say that humans are superior to all other animals. And
Right.
So if you support human evolution, if you believe in human evolution.
Yeah, so this definitely does go back to the stories we've told ourselves in terms of how we make sense of the world. And I grew up in fundamental Christianity. And I know many people did. So what comes up always in this conversation is, okay, only humans were created in the image of God, and nothing else was. Therefore, we're given permission by God. This is the way the story goes. This is the way the theology or the doctrine goes. Therefore, humans were given permission by God to do whatever they want with creation, with the rest of creation. Of course, I think that view there's definitely a biblical argument against that view.
Right.
But be that as it may, that's where many of our minds go, that's what we were brought up with, that humans matter and humans deserve moral consideration and love and compassion and respect and reverence, but nothing else does.
Well, and I think it's true. I just read it again this morning. The philosophers really did a job on this, right? I mean, so many philosophers said, well, animals, you know, and I think even the demarcation, there was this species of things called man, or however you want to say it, anthropos, and then we separated that from everything else, animals. And so philosophers made a demarcation, and that plays into our culture today, where, you know, kind of what you're talking about, where we're superior. And part of that is the whole concept. We've talked about this in past shows, but I just read it again this morning. It has to do with this idea of being able to rationalize, to think, some level of consciousness. And science and philosophy have gone to great lengths over centuries to say that animals aren't conscious, they're not sentient, that they can't think, they can't rationalize. And in fact, now we know that is just not true. Right. So that plays into it as well.
Yeah, science,
not just a religious.
Science is kind of backing away from that.
Right.
But even personal experience, if you have had a relationship with an animal like a dog, that's not based on their market value, right? Then you have had your eyes open that there's more to this animal. They're not just a machine. They're not just meat with legs, right? They do have feelings. They have desires. They have personality. They have, you know, they have an ability to suffer. They have ability to feel joy. So it is just interesting. Like maybe, you know, if we come away from dog, the species of dogs, and we move towards, you know, where would you put a horse on this continuum? Where would you put a cow on this continuum? You know, yeah, I'm not saying that today I'm expecting everyone to put them up with humans, okay? But can we at least come to the place where we all agree that what you do to a cow, let's say, does have some moral implications, that they do deserve more consideration than a rock that you know, that you could just do whatever you want with, because they do feel and they do desire to live. And maybe they have the right to live. Maybe they have the right to some freedom. Maybe they have a right to some degree of happiness.
And so, to be protected from harm also.
Yeah, so just thinking about that continuum, hopefully, is just something to think about as you go through your day or your life. How much value or how much moral consideration do animals deserve? So with that all in mind, the idea of entertainment and the way that it's kind of prone to exploit, and the idea of using non-human animals for our entertainment, animals who are not even capable of understanding what's going to happen to them and are not able to consent to performing. I think horse racing is maybe a good place to go next, because I think a lot of us wrongly assume that horse racing is a benign form of entertainment, that we're allowing horses to do what they naturally do, right? Which we know that horses love to run, and they're good runners, they're fast runners, and so we think, what could possibly be wrong with the industry of horse racing? But you know, it just takes a slightly closer look to see that actually there are some moral problems with consuming this type of entertainment. Starting with what the industry calls wastage. And what that is just that, you know, because of course it's a numbers game. And so the industry will breed far more foals than they know they could ever possibly turn into racehorses. So they overproduce foals by artificially inseminating the mares. And, you know, if you've seen any videos on how horses or cows are artificially inseminated, it's not a gentle, kind process. It's pretty unsettling. And, you know, and of course it's humans deciding when and how often a mare will conceive.
And also, if you replace the horse with a dog or a human, it becomes something else. Is it really that different? You know?
Yeah. Same for humans. We're all the feminist activists to support forced raping of animals.
Raping is forced for sure.
Raping. Yeah. Okay, raping. Yeah. Forced is assumed in the word rape. Okay.
So a lot of these overproduced horses end up being sent to slaughter before they, you know, because they're not competitors for a variety of reasons, or, you know, they are slightly less of a competitor than another horse. So that's a real problem with the industry. And then the horses that do make it to the track are run into the ground. They're forced to race. You know, this is a sport that occurs 365 days a year. So horses are forced to race, and they're injured. You know, they're not least of which is, you know, or very common mouth injuries from the bits. But you know, they're whipped, and they have all kinds of tendon tears and ligament tears, and you know, permanent damage done to their spines, and you know, of course, broken bones occur. And a lot of this is it's mitigated, or there's an attempt to mitigate this through the use of drugs, both performance enhancing drugs, steroids, all kinds of drugs. I mean, we've seen footage of, you know, horses actually being given things like meth or cobra venom, or you know, all sorts of crazy things to get them to perform. But then the pain medication is actually somewhat or just as problematic, if not more problematic, because these horses are given so much painkillers that they don't appear to be in pain, or they don't appear to be injured, so they are entered into races that they really have no business running in. And then we see them collapse on the field, obviously injured, and then they are euthanized on the track. This is kind of like a common experience.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
And even the winners, even the famous horses that win the big races, they are ultimately sent to slaughter. You know, and the industry will swear that their retired racehorses do not end up getting sent to a slaughterhouse. But there's plenty of undercover footage, investigations that have been done, you know, because these racehorses are given a unique brand. And so there's video footage of those famous racehorses being sent to slaughter and being slaughtered. So thousands of racehorses a year end up being euthanized or sent to a slaughterhouse. So it's not a benign sport. It's something that should give us pause when we think about consuming that form of entertainment.
Right. It's interesting that many of these horses die of broken legs, or they're put down because they have a broken leg, or they have heart attacks. Horses have these heart attacks. And if you think about that, how far they're being pushed, because the jockeys are on them and the jockeys are whipping them, and electric shock is also being used. And so they're just being pressed. And like you said, they're already injured and they're already on medications. And you just have to wonder, how many medications do humans take that, affect their tendons, weaken their tendons, or weaken their bones, or weaken their muscles. So you just have to think these, like you said, these animals are already injured and they're given painkillers and they're put on the track to race and they shouldn't even be there. And then they literally, a lot of them die on the track. I mean, we just saw a video, a horse won a race and then collapsed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Right. So I think another one we thought we should touch on today, I actually remember asking my dad when I was a child about the whipping of the horses and the spurs in the sides of the horses. And isn't that wrong? And doesn't that hurt? And isn't that cruel? Because it definitely appeared to be so as to my childlike eyes. And I was told by my father that horses and cows have such thick skin. They're very insensitive. They don't feel things the way human skin feels things. And I accepted that because it came from my father. And I looked into that concept a little deeper, and I actually found 2 studies testing the sensitivity of horse's skin. I couldn't find any about the sensitivity of cow's skin, which I guess in some ways is not surprising. But people have done studies on the sensitivity of horses' skin. One of the studies is put out by the National Institute of Health.gov. But yeah, both of them look into this, and they say that actually what they have found is that they are not insulated from pain at all. In fact, their conclusions are that there are actually more nerve endings in their skin than humans. So compared to humans, they actually are even more sensitive to pain than humans are. So something, to keep in mind as you see how horses are used.
I mean, there's no reason it wouldn't translate to other animals of their, size.
Yeah. We definitely try to pacify ourselves by telling ourselves and our children that animals can't feel. And this is just one more iteration of that, their skin is so thick they can't feel that. It doesn't hurt them the way it would hurt you. But there's no scientific truth behind that. They do feel just the way. They have the exact same nervous system that we have, the same central nervous system, the same peripheral nervous system, the same nerve endings, and they do experience pain.
So we want to talk about bullfighting a little bit, which is, where I come from in France, in the south of France, it's still legal. It comes from Spain originally. And it's another form of animal exploitation, and it's quite close to the rodeo, maybe a little more extreme in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting about bullfighting is, and this even goes back to hunting in the United States. Like, we call it a sport, but is it really a sport? I mean, are animals at the same level of an advantage, a competitive advantage, or the same level of competition as a hunter with a gun? So yeah, in the case of bullfighting, before the bull even enters the ring, he is kept in the dark for sometimes 12 hours. He's not fed. He's not given water. And sometimes the bull is drugged, but he's also, right before he enters the ring, he's in the dark, and then he's stabbed many times. So he's already bleeding. He's already injured. And then he's released out into the arena to take on the matador. And then, of course, at that point, the matador in 3 acts just essentially tortures and kills this bull. And so if you just think about it in terms of a sport and an equal playing field, they're not, the bull and the human are not on an equal playing field. The bull's already he's already entering the ring at a disadvantage.
Right.
Which just seems so unfair.
And he's distressed. He doesn't know anything that's happening.
He's
and he has
dazed,
no
right.
consent.
No, exactly. He's been in darkness, and then he's opened up into the bright light, and he's injured. Yeah, and he's possibly drugged. So...
Yeah, so the first act, they use so they have all these implements of torture. They have all these different weapons. The first one, or one of the first ones, is the puya, which is this thick, it just looks like it would inflict puncture wounds.
Yeah.
They use that to tear muscle, but obviously there's a significant blood loss. So the first act is all about weakening the animal, who is already in a state of distress. The second act is kind of about reviving the animal or shocking the animal back into some kind of angered state with these things that are like harpoons are stuck all over the bull. So like if you've seen pictures of bullfights before the bull is actually killed, and they have all this just like a wreath of harpoons sticking out of their shoulders, and blood is just running off of their bodies. So that's kind of to wake them up, to make it more of a show for the audience. So the entertainment value, of course, they don't just immediately kill the bull, which would not be much of a show, right? So they have to prolong it, and I'm putting air quotes around the word art. They have to make it an act of art or a work of art. It's almost like a dance between the bullfighter and the bull. That's how it's thought of. And then, of course, the third act is the execution, where the bull is killed with a long sword to the spine. Similar to rodeo, similar, as Kevin mentioned, to hunting, there's so much cultural value woven into this form of entertainment, that somehow this is who we are and this is our identity. We've been doing this for thousands of years, and it provides jobs for our people. All this
food for our families.
Yeah, positive, stuff is scaffolded up around it. But even in Spain, where it originated, we researched this a little bit, and 50% of Spaniards want it banned at this point.
Wow.
And if you poll just the young people, the younger generation, right, it's 87%.
Well, and that's interesting in the documentary watch. Like the crowds are declining, and the crowd that is there is basically older people who grew up with this. The younger people are not really attending these bullfights. Mm-hmm. So there's your culture.
Yeah, I have a little story about that. So I have family in the south of France, and where there is corrida, which is the term in France. And I have an uncle who's a really big fan of that. And he brought his son, who was like 8, I think, at that point. And the kid was really excited, obviously, going, because he had no idea what it was. And then he came back completely distressed, like hysterically crying, completely traumatized, basically, from it. And not a thought was given to that.
Yeah.
Isn't
that crazy?
Yeah.
No, that's children. Children should be maybe a thermometer for civilization, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
Seriously.
Especially in terms of sensitivity to, compassion sometimes is better done by kids.
Because clearly, like me, with being told a horse or a cow can't feel being whipped, or this child being taken and watched a bull being murdered, basically, our gut reaction is, no, this is wrong, right?
Because it's so obvious that they can't feel. But when you train yourself to kind of deny that obvious fact, because they show all the signs of distress that a human would, or that a dog would,
right?
Then you kind of train yourself, you desensitize yourself.
Right, because that child's choice in that moment is, I either have to stop caring so that I'm not made fun of by my family or whatever, or I have to believe my gut, which is kind of impossible developmentally for a child.
But this is what our civilizations do. We beat the sensitivity out of children. We It's the propaganda, right?
Right.
And then, you know, like the argument that is used is like we're making society stronger. It's like making men manlier or something like that. What kind of world like do you get when you desensitize your population so much that they can't even tell what's cruel or not in terms of what you do to animals, for example, or each other? Is it really that manly to do this to vulnerable beings instead of protecting them?
No, it's like we're being untrained, right? I mean, people have a visceral reaction and then they're untrained and then they want to have a debate about it. Like we're going to have an intellectual debate. Is it right or wrong? I mean, you had a visceral reaction to it. That should tell you everything you need to know, right?
Yes. Yeah, I also loved seeing on that documentary that many of the most famous arenas, bullfighting arenas in Spain, have been converted into other uses, you know, even like for concerts and things like that. So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see because
human progress.
Yeah, like maybe there was a time in human history where that's where we were as a civilization, but that time has passed and we can evolve and we can say we're part of a new era and that doesn't work for us anymore. That doesn't sit well with us anymore. And we need to find new traditions, you know.
Yeah.
So
that don't come at the expense of someone else.
Right.
Yes. And that, I mean, and it's not that we don't care that, you know, like in this case, there was a bull breeder who said his family's been doing this since the mid 19th century, since the 1800s. They've been breeding bulls. And yeah, of course, I feel the pain of thinking that might be taken away from you, that legacy might end, you know, something that your great-great-grandfather did and you wanted to pass on to your kids. I understand that, but I think we can be sympathetic, but we can also say it's time for you to find something else.
Right.
Like that I mean, it's wrong.
If you make comparisons in history, there are other things, you know, other jobs that we now see as completely unethical that had to change.
Right.
Yeah.
They had to find different jobs.
Right. Well, that is the human part of the human condition, right? Is that things do change and we have to adjust and we have to be flexible. But I think many times, all of us, sometimes we're faced with challenges and we don't see a good solution. And then in time, a really good solution, sometimes a better solution presents itself.
Absolutely.
And we're happier. So, you know, things that we couldn't see, now we see. So.
And all of this just lends itself so nicely to segueing into like our cultural context, which is the love of rodeo that, you know, has been part of the United States of America's legacy.
Especially the Western United States, right?
The idea of the beautiful romantic idea of the cowboy and the way he knows how to handle cattle and he knows how to handle his horse. And there's a lot of cultural pride kind of woven into rodeo. But let's take a closer look. So, you know, there's many events that occur at a rodeo, but they kind of all center around either roping an animal, calf roping, steer roping, team roping. You know, these are different ways of looking at basically where someone on a horse is chasing after oftentimes a calf. And the calf is running at a full sprint. So on average, 30 miles an hour, the calf is running away. And the contest is to see how quickly the cowboy can lasso the calf, pull it to a stop, get off their horse, and then tie up the legs of the calf.
Kind of hogtied or whatever.
Yeah. You know, we could definitely just spend a few minutes on that. And, you know, so when you watch that, it's important to know that rope is not just a soft, you know, flexible nylon rope. It's basically sandpaper. When you form it into a lasso, it holds its own shape. It's very stiff and rough.
Right.
And lots of times that ends up around their neck, which I think is the goal. But often with steer roping, it goes around their horns, and lots of times it ends up being cinched tightly around their eyes. So if you think about sprinting as fast as you can, if you could sprint 30 miles an hour, and then having this rough piece of sandpaper cinched very tightly around your neck or around your eyes and pulling you to a stop. So these calves fly up into the air and do a backflip and land on top of their skull or land on their back in weird ways.
Right.
And then, lots of times by that time we've seen where they have a broken neck, or they have a broken leg, and then the cowboy comes over and just yanks them and ties them up as fast as he can. So this is, again, the entertainment value of that should give us pause. Like that should cause us to be like, I don't know if I want to support this sport. And some people have called these, sadists masquerading as cowboys.
Wow. Yeah, I wonder if the equivalent would be like if a person, a human, like took their car and drove it into a brick wall or a thing at 30 miles an hour, and I don't know.
Yeah, the pounds per pressure or whatever.
Well, this is literally gladiators before animals.
Yeah.
We see the gladiator sport thing, like they weren't consenting to it with slaves and I think prisoners. I'm not sure. That had to be gladiators. Mm-hmm. They didn't give any consent, and of course, it was a horrible death for them and the wild animals as well that were used. We see that as a sadistic sport, right?
Yeah.
Because it's deriving pleasure from the pain of someone else.
Right.
What's different with the animals?
100%. And the thing is, I mean, clearly, if you were to do this to a human, I think anyone would think this person would be injured. If they were running at 30 miles an hour, which is impossible, right, for a human, right? I think. And you put a rope around their neck, and then you brought them to an abrupt halt, you'd think you'd break their neck, right? That would just be obvious. And somehow, do we think these animals are somehow more durable, especially a calf?
Right.
I mean, they're more fragile.
Yeah, they're more fragile. They're still growing. And
they're babies.
So this is from an article. It says, cruel tools like the, quote, hot shot are used to make the animals perform. So this would be maybe more for like the bull riding event. This is an electric prod that scares an animal into displaying abnormally dramatic reactions through intense pain. Other tools include metal spurs and bucking straps that burn the animal's abdomen and groin area and cause him to buck and can lead to back and leg injuries. Also, travel between events is punishing as well. Animals are often transported over long distances in hot and overcrowded trucks and trailers. The official rules of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association permit them to be confined during transport for as long as 24 hours without being fed or watered. And then if you break those kinds of rules, there are basically no penalties to deter that kind of behavior. So, earlier, Kevin, you were saying something about the shocking of cows and how.
Oh, right. Yeah. Especially like the bull riders, while they're still in their chute, waiting to be released with a cowboy on top of them. They're trying to calm the bull, but they also want to put on a good show for the crowd. And so a lot of times what happens, and if you think about what's happening in a bull, they have these flank straps around their waist, around their lower waist. And a lot of people have accused the rodeos of cinching the bull's testicles, and they're saying that's not happening. But they have this flank strap around their waist, which is close to their genitals. And I mean, seriously, if somebody strapped something around my waist and you were close to my nutsack, I might feel uncomfortable. But at any rate, veterinarians have done checks on these animals after they've been at a rodeo, these bulls, and they found that there's these abrasions underneath a lot of the flank straps. So to the point that they're suggesting that a burr or some kind of object was placed underneath the flank strap and tightened, which then just creates this abrasion on the animal. So there are all these things that are happening to this animal before it's released. And so it's got the flank strap, it's got the cowboy on it. The cowboy has spurs on, right? So he can kick the animal's sides with these spurs. But then right before they open the chute, they give the bull an electric shock, among other things, and then they open the thing and the bull just goes nuts. And of course, many say the bull is bred to buck, especially if it has a cowboy on it, right? So it's going to do that, but they also heighten that by just doing all these things to the bull, shocking it, cinching its waist, doing all these things, and putting maybe burrs or objects inside that cinch strap, or what's called a flank strap. Yeah, and in terms of the bull, male bull, a he, Apparently, because of bovines, because of their stomachs and the rumen and how they're physiologically made, they are more susceptible to electric shock than, say, other animals who don't have the four compartment stomach or rumen, things like that. So it would seem that these bulls are experiencing a different level of shock or a different level of pain from a shock electromagnetic device than, say, a horse or some other kind of animal. So yeah, it's torture throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the more you learn about rodeos, I have to say, a lot of the videos we watch, it seems like every event, it's just torture upon torture upon torture. And the people who are participating in this, you really have to wonder what it is they're getting out of it.
Right. So there's obviously the fatal injuries, the broken backs and necks, the heart attacks, the aneurysms. But for those who are not having to be euthanized or die on site, there are obviously multiple injuries to these animals, and they're not really given any time to heal between events. They're just loaded onto a truck or trailer and hauled to the next event and forced to go through it all again. So if you think about a typical fair week or rodeo series, where these animals are just going from rodeo to rodeo to rodeo to rodeo, it's really hard to think about how, if you had a broken bone or a tear in your muscle or whatever it is, and then you were forced to go out and go through it all again.
Right.
And they're obviously, they are not being considered in terms of what's actually best for them, or what gives them comfort or health. And, they will be sent to slaughter at the end regardless. So again, the idea of entertainment, if you as the consumer are paying or supporting a form of entertainment where the performer cannot give consent and is being denied just basic rights, it's something to stop and think about. If that's something that is aligned with your values, something that you want to support, something that you want to continue, or something you'd rather put your entertainment dollars somewhere else.
Right.
So cows are clearly the animals at the rodeo who suffer the most and are disregarded the most. But as we know, the horses, who the rodeo affectionately refers to as our animal athletes, and who do receive some training. The horses are the only ones that receive any training on how to rodeo. The horses also get injured and are used, exploited. Even I would say a great example of that is the barrel racing event, in which the horses obviously are timed and they're forced to race around barrels, around and around and around. And while that's going on, the rider is incessantly kicking the sides of the horse with spurs. And, many people will point out, spurs are not sharp. They're very dull. But one veterinarian pointed out in a documentary that, dull is not necessarily better in terms of the damage done. And she drew the analogy, would you rather be stuck in the finger with a needle, or would you rather be hit in the finger with a hammer? And so even though the spurs are dull, the repeated kicking, as hard as the rider can kick during the whole race, in the ribs and the abdomen is doing damage to them, is bruising them at a minimum.
Right. Well, what's also happening is that rider is also whipping the hindquarters of the horse at the same time, incessantly, as they're also kicking their sides. And what's also interesting to me about that is they're getting up to the very high speeds between the barrels, but then they have to come to this abrupt slowdown and short turn around the barrel, almost to the point of leaning, to their sides. So you just have to wonder what kind of damage it's doing to the horse, its spine. I think we saw some x-rays where horses' spines are creating deformities are happening as a result of these kinds of events, with having to run at high speeds, sharp turns with a person on your back, and you're being kicked and whipped to perform.
Right. And again, if that happened to you last night and now you're being you loaded onto a truck to be heading to the next event where it's going to happen to you all over again, and you're already sore, you're already bruised, you're already, you haven't had any time to heal from that injury. And we were watching some rodeo footage, and the announcer says all kinds of offensive and crazy things to the audience, but at some point in the rodeo, it seems like it's always common practice for the horses to be trotted out and kind of circle the arena while the announcer is like, we couldn't do this without our animal athletes. Let's give our animal athletes a hand, and these animal athletes are given the best of care. We ensure that they're given the best of care, and they're treated like members of our own family. These rodeo guys treat these animals like members of their own family. And of course, anytime
when we say we love them, we love our animal athletes.
I mean, anytime you hear farmers or rodeo people say that they love these animals as much as they love members of their own family, it's like, I've seen the joke where I think we should call family services. I think we should call social services. If you do that to your family members, like, you belong in prison, so. So there's always like a PR defensive with bullfighting or horse racing or the rodeo. They always love to explicitly state, we're doing everything in our power to make sure that these animals have happy retirements or whatever. But then you look a little deeper, you just scratch just a tiny bit off the surface, and you actually start looking at what's going on to these animals, and it's all complete BS.
Well, and not only that, but same with horse racing and everything. They're always making the argument back that, well, why would we injure our animals? We're making money. This is our livelihood. We make tons of money. Well, it's kind of what we see in animal agriculture too, I think. It's like, yeah, you make money, but you make money in exploiting them. And you say, why would we do this? Well, you are doing it. And
the cost for veterinary care is more than it would cost to replace that animal. So the animals are expendable.
Absolutely expendable.
They're not like an investment you have to protect at all costs. So,
and you can go get another one.
Right.
And this is what they do. I mean, we saw this in a documentary too. When these horses are out on the track racing, there are auctions happening on the side where, wealthy owners are buying the horse that just won the race. And in fact, we saw a case where people bid on a horse that was running in a race, and then the horse, I think it's the one where the horse collapsed, and it collapsed and got an injury that really could not go on anymore, but the person already made the deal and had to buy the horse, even though the horse would never race again. Do you know what I mean? So that, and then they talk about the risks involved. But I mean, this is the whole market. This is the whole event. What am I trying to say though? This is the industry.
Right.
So.
And so it really, again, coming back to we as consumers, us as consumers, we have the responsibility. The only reason why an entertainment would exist is because there's a market for it. An entertainer would not do that form of entertainment if nobody came or consumed or cared to consume or pay the money to consume that entertainment. So it really does weigh on the consumer to decide, is this something that I want to continue?
Right. And we see this, and a lot of times I think we hear this as vegan activists, like, well, it's too hard to change, and you're asking a lot. And I mean, I feel like this was an argument that was brought to Al Gore about, why is he only going after fossil fuel companies? Why isn't he going after animal agriculture? And he said it's too hard to get people to change their diets. That would just be too much for someone to do. And yet, as a consumer, a lot of times we think, oh, it's just too much. And, there's the whole, what do you want to call it? Peer pressure. There's almost like a consumer peer pressure, like about what your friends and family might think of you if you support something or don't support something, because it's part of our family heritage and our culture and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, if you just think about the power of the consumer, and, there are many examples. Obviously, the most recent example that I think comes to mind is with Bud Light. And whether you agree or disagree with the politics of what happened with Bud Light, I mean, consumers overnight change the trajectory of the market share of Bud, of Anheuser-Busch. I mean, they just did, and they continue to do so. So consumers can make a massive difference in a company's trajectory and their market share. And we can decide. We have that power.
Yeah, just look at the new vegan products on the market that were
Absolutely.
nowhere near where they are 10 years ago.
Correct.
You know?
100%. 100%.
So make sure when you are looking for entertainment to consume that you are consuming entertainment and not exploitainment.
Exploitainment. Do not engage in exploitainment.
So proud of the word. It's so
We came up with that.
Exploitainment.
Yeah.
All right, I have a little quote to end this episode with. It's by Lynn White. The greatest ethical test that we're ever going to face is the treatment of those who are at our mercy. I think it applies very well to this subject. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our future events. On August 20th, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., we'll have a vegan potluck, so anyone is very much welcome. Just make sure to bring a vegan dish or a vegan drink. And it will be at Lindley Park Center.
Nice.
On August 29th, we will have a With a Free event at the Farmers Market. So it's between 5:30 and 8 p.m.
That's the evening Farmers Market? Nice. All right. Well, hey, thank you for joining us for this dialogue. And you can always reach out to us in our email.
Ooh, I just wanted to say the With a Free event is a movie challenge. So it's basically a horror movie challenge. So come take it. Come check it out. We'd love to
get
horror movies.
And then you get a free snack if you watch all three. It's 3 minutes, right?
Yes.
It's
3.5 minutes.
Free vegan snack.
If you watch 3.5 minutes of a movie, you will get free food.
Free vegan food.
Yes.
Of course.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
And we will see you next time.